Ordinary people go through everyday routines and recreational activities, never imagining danger is already built into the familiar. In this collection, we're examining 6 of the most disturbing accidents involving couples. Each happened during activities so routine or recreational, you might have done them yourself today. It was February 18, 2017, on Lake Superior near Duluth, Minnesota. Strong northwest winds, shifting sheets, and thin fractures had formed across the ice, despite conditions still appearing safe to anglers. Michael Stevens, 34, and his wife Stacy, 31, were experienced winter sports enthusiasts who kept a consistent routine of traveling for anniversary trips. Friends later described them as a couple who preferred remote outdoor locations over crowded vacation spots. They had brought their own equipment, including a small portable shelter, and had rented a cabin close to the shoreline. That morning, they walked approximately 1.5 miles onto the lake, using a spud bar to check ice every few hundred yards, and eventually choosing a spot several hundred feet from an active pressure ridge where fish activity was historically higher. Several anglers later told investigators they had reminded the couple that winds were expected to intensify, but the pair appeared confident in their chosen location. By early afternoon, wind gusts increased to nearly 35 miles per hour. Anglers in the area reported hearing long, low groans coming through the ice, typical of shifting sheet movement. Michael and Stacy continued fishing despite the deteriorating sounds. Empty beer cans later recovered near their shelter suggest they had been drinking throughout the day, which investigators noted as a possible factor affecting their reaction time once the ice began to move. Between 2:20 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., a lead began opening between their position and the shoreline as the main sheet detached under wind pressure. Witnesses farther inland observed the gap widen gradually over several minutes, reaching approximately 20 feet across. Michael attempted to cross the lead early, stepping over while the gap remained only a couple of feet wide. As he tried to assist Stacy from the opposite edge, the separation increased again. The witness, positioned roughly 300 yards away, saw Stacy lose footing as the ice edge undercut beneath her and slip into the near-freezing water. Michael attempted to reach her from the opposite side, lying prone to distribute weight as the edge continued to shear. Investigators determined from track marks and the position of the recovered gear that he slipped into the water while trying to pull her upward. Both were pulled under the ice lip several times as waves from the shifting sheet pushed against the opening. The cold water and their saturated winter clothing severely limited movement. The witness made an immediate 911 call, and dispatch logs confirm responders were advised of a rapidly moving ice field. Rescue teams could not safely travel across the unstable surface. According to the caller's timeline and later reconstruction using body temperature data, the couple remained conscious for roughly 10 minutes before hypothermia caused incapacitation. They disappeared beneath the ice shortly afterward. Over the next 48 hours, steady winds carried the detached floe toward the southwest shoreline. When it made contact with land, recovery teams retrieved both bodies along with their shelter and equipment. Medical examiners recorded severe hypothermia as the cause of death for both victims. The incident led local officials to update early season and late season warning protocols for pressure ridge activity across popular fishing access points. It was August 12, 2016, at an abandoned grain elevator in Buffalo, New York. The 14-story concrete structure had stood vacant for 8 years, its upper floors weakened by repeated storms that forced water through open roof panels and into the supporting beams. Although multiple warning signs surrounded the property and the building had been condemned since 2014, urban explorers continued to enter through broken windows and unsecured lower levels to photograph the interior shafts. Jason White, 26, had spent years documenting abandoned industrial buildings for his photography portfolio. His girlfriend, Lisa Kowalski, 24, assisted with social media content for small marketing clients and often accompanied him to film behind-the-scenes footage. Neither had training in structural safety or building integrity. Local explorers had recently circulated warnings about the grain elevator after the most recent storm caused cracking on the upper floors. City inspection records from 2015 had marked several levels as structurally unsafe, including the 10th floor, where repeated roof runoff had weakened the concrete slab. Despite this, the couple planned to capture sunrise from the highest accessible point as part of an online photography challenge. They entered just before dawn through a basement window that had been pried open months earlier. The couple climbed slowly, using rusted stair segments and makeshift ladders left by past trespassers. Jason filmed portions of their ascent, including Lisa stepping around missing stair panels. Surveillance logs later showed that a security patrol had passed the building less than an hour earlier, but the guard did not spot them. By the time they reached the 10th floor, the effects of years of water infiltration were visible. Large sections of concrete had spalled away, exposing corroded rebar. The far side of the floor contained an old grain chute shaft that extended directly to the basement. According to investigators, a wide shear crack, likely expanded by the previous night's rainfall, ran across the slab where foot traffic had repeatedly stressed the weakened area. As Lisa moved toward a window to frame her shot, the slab beneath her gave off a sharp cracking sound. She stepped back instinctively, but the compromised section sheared away in a single downward motion. The sudden drop caused her to reach upward, and evidence from Jason's camera, which was recovered near the collapse point, showed her grabbing at his lower leg as the slab broke free. The force pulled Jason forward, and he slid across the fractured edge before the remaining concrete crumbled under his weight. Both fell through the open shaft, descending 8 stories before striking concrete debris and metal supports in the basement. A security guard conducting exterior rounds reported hearing a sharp crash reverberate through the structure, followed by a brief echo of shifting rubble. When he located the basement access point and directed his flashlight inside, he saw both victims at the bottom of the shaft. Emergency responders arrived within several minutes, but confirmed that neither had survived the fall. The medical examiner documented extensive blunt force trauma, consistent with an 8-story descent onto concrete and metal. Their equipment, including Jason's recording device, contained footage up to the moment the floor began to crack. The building was demolished the following year after officials cited structural failure and repeated trespassing incidents as justification for removal. It was May 20th, 2019, in rural Oklahoma during an active tornado outbreak. A slow-moving supercell had already produced several brief touchdowns across nearby counties, and the National Weather Service had issued tornado warnings for the region due to increasing rotation and heavy precipitation wrapping around the storm's center. Emergency managers warned residents that rain-wrapped tornadoes could become visually undetectable as curtains of precipitation obscured the circulation from view. Louis Park, 29, was a meteorology graduate student collecting field data for his thesis. His equipment, purchased with personal funds and small departmental grants, had been approved for research, but university officials later confirmed he had not submitted the required field safety plan for storm observing. His girlfriend, Amanda Rodriguez, 27, worked as an emergency dispatcher. Relatives later told investigators she had grown up around severe weather, but had never witnessed a tornado directly. The pair had chased storms for 2 years, documenting dozens of supercells for Louis' research, and often treated their trips as combined fieldwork and travel. On this day, experienced chasers monitoring the same storm had repositioned farther south to avoid the developing precipitation core, which had begun obscuring the lowering wall cloud. Louis, however, identified a radar signature he believed showed a stable viewing position. Witness reports from other chasers indicated the storm had started to occlude, meaning the tornado's circulation was wrapping backward into heavy rain, reducing contrast and making its exact location extremely difficult to track visually. They stopped on a gravel turnout, along a rural road approximately a mile east of the visible wall cloud, setting up a tripod, handheld weather instruments, and a vehicle-mounted camera. As the supercell intensified, the precipitation shield thickened, and inflow winds accelerated. Visibility deteriorated rapidly. According to data recovered from their instruments, pressure dropped steadily, and wind direction shifted, signs consistent with a tightening low-level circulation. They attempted to reposition, but a low dip in the road had filled with fast-rising runoff from the storm's core, creating a shallow but impassable flash flood crossing. Radar analysis later confirmed that the tornado's track shifted eastward during the occlusion process, placing the circulation much closer to their turnout than radar had originally indicated. With visibility nearly zero in the rain-wrapped core, the couple remained stationary for 12 minutes, unable to retreat through the floodwater. Wind speeds increased sharply, and debris began moving horizontally across the field. When the tornado's outer circulation reached their position, airborne debris became the primary hazard. A metal roof panel torn from a destroyed barn was carried by the inflow and struck the passenger side of their vehicle at high velocity. The panel punched through the windshield area and collapsed the compartment. A storm chaser 2 miles away attempted radio contact moments earlier, but received no response. When the rain cleared, the same chaser located their vehicle severely damaged along the turnout. Emergency responders reached the scene within 30 minutes. The medical examiner documented massive blunt force trauma consistent with debris traveling over 100 miles per hour within the tornadic circulation. Toxicology reports indicated both victims were sober. Louis's advisor later finished his thesis using recovered field data. Amanda's employer provided standard benefits, and the local weather service incorporated the couple's final recordings into updated training materials for rain-wrapped tornado hazards. It was September 8, 2017, at a spring-fed cave system in northern Florida. Water in the spring run measured 72 degrees Fahrenheit, with visibility reaching nearly 60 feet in the main cavern areas. The site required proof of advanced cave certification due to its long limestone passages, silting hazards, and complex branching tunnels. Facility logs later confirmed that neither diver had the necessary qualifications, making their dive an unauthorized entry into an overhead environment. Robert Kim, 31, worked as a software developer, and his fiancée Jennifer Walsh, 28, taught aquatic biology at a local community college. Both held open water certifications with more than 100 logged dives, but their only formal training for overhead environments came from a basic cavern course completed 3 months earlier. They had planned an engagement celebration weekend built around diving, and park staff found notes in their vehicle showing that Jennifer hoped to collect freshwater samples for a comparative study she was developing. Their equipment consisted of recreational single-tank setups suited for reef diving, not for extended cave penetration. A local dive shop owner had refused to rent them cave gear such as primary lights, reels, and redundant cylinders due to their lack of advanced training. They planned a short 45-minute dive to a chamber located roughly 200 feet inside the system. Following standard cavern protocol, they began laying a guideline from the entrance. As they advanced, visibility dropped in several side passages where fine silt coated the floor. Other divers later reported slight but persistent water flow in those areas after recent rainfall, creating pockets of reduced visibility and mild suction that could pull divers off the main route if they strayed too close to side tunnels. Investigators later determined that the couple reached a junction where the main passage curved left, while a narrower, lesser-used tunnel extended straight ahead. This smaller passage was known for heavy silting, and the subtle flow pushed loose sediment into the water column. When Robert drifted too close to the restriction, the current gradually drew both divers into the side passage. Their guideline, already taut from the angle of their entry, rubbed against a sharp limestone edge and was severed, leaving them without a continuous reference to the exit. Their dive computers showed they continued deeper for several minutes, likely searching for familiar features. The dense silt reduced visibility to nearly zero, and they eventually became separated. Their computers indicated they spent a total of 73 minutes underwater, possibly only because they had brought high-capacity cylinders intended for longer dives. Stress indicators showed elevated air consumption, consistent with disorientation and physical effort. Both divers swam in looping patterns common in lost line emergencies. A certified cave instructor, Tom Bradley, who had finished an earlier dive, noticed they had not resurfaced after 1 hour. He entered the system with full cave equipment and located them in 2 separate passages approximately 50 feet apart. Their backup lights were still clipped to their harnesses, and their line markers were misplaced, suggesting they were unable to follow emergency procedures under stress. The medical examiner listed drowning from air exhaustion as the cause of death. Park officials later expanded the existing guideline network through the branching sections and increased restrictions requiring guided dives for inexperienced visitors. It was January 14, 2018, in the Teton Range near Jackson, Wyoming. Recent storms and strong winds had loaded north-facing slopes with unstable snow. Avalanche danger was rated considerable to high, and public advisories urged backcountry travelers to avoid steep terrain due to rapidly shifting slab conditions. Alex Johnson, 33, worked as a ski instructor at a local mountain resort, with more than a decade of experience teaching and guiding in varied conditions. His wife, Tina Santos, 30, was a physical therapist and former volunteer ski patroller, known among friends for her strong technical ability in steep terrain. Both had years of backcountry travel behind them and regularly planned ski outings to celebrate milestones. For this trip, they had prepared for weeks, selecting a remote route that offered untracked snow and steep lines similar to those featured in the magazines Tina followed. According to friends interviewed later, the couple had discussed their confidence in terrain assessment despite the elevated avalanche danger. They began their ascent mid-morning and hiked 3 miles through rolling forest before reaching a broad, north-facing slope above 9,000 feet. The aspect had been highlighted in recent advisories due to wind loading from westerly gusts. Although both carried avalanche beacons, probes, and shovels, investigators could not confirm whether the couple performed a pre-trip beacon check, a routine step recommended before all backcountry travel. Witnesses at the trailhead recalled that the two appeared optimistic about conditions and intended to ski separate lines down the slope. Shortly after noon, they reached their respective drop-in points, approximately 100 feet apart along the ridgeline. Their ski descent patterns, preserved in the debris field, indicated they began within seconds of each other. Avalanche investigators later noted that both launched onto the same unsupported wind slab, one that had formed during the previous storm as snow accumulated unevenly beneath the ridgetop. As their tracks cut across the slope, stress propagated downward through the weak layer beneath the slab. A sharp, audible fracture released across an estimated 400-foot crown, with slab depths averaging around 3 feet, according to later measurements. The combined weight and vibration of their nearly simultaneous entries likely accelerated the failure. The slab broke free and accelerated downslope, carrying both skiers through a steep mid-slope cliff band roughly 30 feet high. The debris continued another 600 feet into the runout zone, where it settled in deposits averaging 8 feet deep. A climber on a nearby ridge saw the fracture line sweep across the slope and notified emergency responders at 2:47 p.m. Harsh winds and uneven terrain delayed rescue teams, who arrived roughly 2 hours later, and located both victims during a systematic probe search. The medical examiner documented extensive blunt force trauma, consistent with impacts suffered during the fall over the cliff band. Evidence suggested both died from these injuries before being buried in the avalanche debris. The incident contributed to updates in local avalanche education materials and reinforced warnings issued during high-danger periods for popular backcountry access areas. It was October 17, 2015, during Bridge Day at New River Gorge in West Virginia. Gusty winds shifted across the span throughout the morning, with periodic gusts near the upper limits event staff considered acceptable. Advisories encouraged jumpers to wait for calmer intervals, and many experienced participants delayed their attempts as wind direction continued to change. Despite the conditions, jumps proceeded during pockets of lighter wind. Jay Brooks, 27, worked in construction and had taken up base jumping the previous year after advancing from recreational skydiving. His logbook showed 15 completed base jumps, several of them made in marginal weather. His girlfriend, Ashley Reed, 25, was a yoga instructor who had completed 8 jumps. Friends later told investigators the couple had planned this jump as part of their one-year anniversary trip, and Jay had spoken enthusiastically about the opportunity to participate in a legal base event. Both maintained their own equipment, but investigators noted that neither had recently had their rigs reviewed by an experienced packer or mentor. Ashley's main parachute, in particular, had been repacked by Jay a few days earlier, and post-incident inspection showed several steps were incomplete. They arrived at the bridge mid-morning and observed multiple jumpers postponing jumps due to the shifting wind. Witnesses reported that Ashley expressed concern about the gusts, but Jay appeared confident they could jump safely if they timed their exits between stronger bursts. Video footage reviewed later confirmed Jay consumed beer earlier in the day, though toxicology results placed his blood alcohol content below legal limits. Jay jumped first during a brief lull at 11:23 a.m., according to event video timestamps. His canopy opened cleanly, and he landed without incident in the designated recovery zone. Spectators reported him signaling upward, encouraging Ashley to follow. She waited several minutes on the platform as winds picked up again. When she finally stepped off, a crosswind gust arrived almost immediately, shifting her body position and pushing her toward the bridge's steel framework. Investigators reviewing high frame rate video noted that her parachute deployment began a second or two later than recommended for bridge height jumps, likely narrowing the time available for the canopy to fully inflate and stabilize. As her pilot chute caught air, the partial deployment created asymmetric drag, and the wind added lateral force. Her trajectory angled toward the structural beams beneath the deck. She struck the steel framework at high speed approximately 100 feet below the bridge. The impact left her unconscious, and her parachute lines wrapped around the beams, leaving her suspended without the possibility of self-rescue. Witnesses saw Jay attempt to reach Ashley by scrambling down the steep, wet rock face beneath the bridge. The slope was a mix of broken limestone shelves and loose soil, and several people reported he slipped multiple times while trying to descend toward the riverbank. As he moved across a narrow ledge no more than a few feet wide, the surface gave way beneath him. He slid downslope, struck a protruding rock formation, and then fell roughly 200 feet before coming to rest in a boulder field near the water. Event staff activated emergency procedures immediately. Rope teams deployed from the bridge deck to reach Ashley's suspended position, while ground teams worked their way toward Jay. Responders reached Ashley first, securing her to prevent further movement. She showed no signs of life, and rescuers noted that the severity of her head and torso injuries indicated she had likely died at the moment of impact with the steel structure. Jay was located shortly afterward by a separate rescue group approaching from below. His injuries, multiple fractures and extensive internal trauma, were consistent with a high-elevation ground impact on rocky terrain. Both victims had been wearing lightweight base helmets, but investigators concluded that the forces involved in the collision and fall exceeded the protective capabilities of the equipment, which is designed primarily to prevent minor impacts during controlled landings, rather than high-speed collisions or long falls. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now